I'm a deficit.
Or best you can stand in front of me. Anyone tall?
Yeah, right here. The mayor's going to be in the middle, so we're just going to be standing in the back.
Great. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, all behind him. Yes. A lot of the people might know.
Okay, guys, last mic check, white balance, everybody good? White balance. There go my phones. Oh, thanks, Chief. Y'all good? Mic check, uno, dos, tres, mic check, 1, 2. Okay, good to go.
Thanks for being here. Good. All right. Hello, everyone. All set? All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I released my final proposed budget for fiscal year 2026. Joining me this afternoon are Fire Chief Robert Logan, Assistant Police Chief Rudy Tai, Matt Vespi, our city's Chief Financial Officer, Chris McFadden, our Deputy Chief Operating Officer for Infrastructure, Casey Smith, our Deputy Chief Operating Officer for External Services. We also have Bethany Bezak, the Director of Transportation Department, Rania Aman, our City Engineer and the leader of our Engineering and Capital Projects Department, Katie Keach, our Deputy Director of Homelessness Strategies and Solutions, and then also ASME Local 127 President Tim Douglas, and my Policy Director in the Mayor's Office, Matt Yagagin. This budget is shaped by the reality of our city's structural budget deficit, refined through feedback that we've received from the public and from city council members, and built around the priorities that I believe matter most to the majority of San Diegans, specifically keeping them safe, reducing homelessness, building homes that they can afford, and fixing the damn roads and other critical infrastructure. And I'll cut to the chase and start with this. The cities of San Diego's financial picture has not improved since I released the draft budget last month. Revenues are down, expenses are up, and economic volatility that cities are facing all across this country continues to intensify due to the larger macroeconomic environment. But what we've done with this budget is to act responsibly. We have made strategic decisions to protect core services and respond to community needs and keep the city moving forward, and ultimately to produce a budget that is balanced. The final proposed budget includes some very important adjustments. Thanks to the careful reallocation of funds, we have been able to restore funding for the San Diego Police Department's Northwestern Division Patrol with an augmented leadership structure. Chief Wall and I heard the concerns raised by Council President Joe LaCava and members of the City Council, as well as members of the community, and working together with our Department of Finance, we have been able to find a solution that will keep this division operating more or less as it does today. In addition, this final proposed budget funds 2 vice detective positions in the San Diego Police Department in order to address prostitution and human trafficking, again, in response to City Council member feedback, as well as requests from the community. We're also restoring $2.1 million to our animal services contract with the San Diego Humane Society, protecting their vital work. This brings the overall proposed reduction to their contract down by more than half, ensuring that San Diegans continue to see the services that they expect from this organization. I want to transition to expressing my appreciation and gratitude to our labor partners for their understanding of the tough choices that are necessary in this budget proposal. As ASPE's Local 127's president has acknowledged, this is the city's blue-collar workers, that we are in a difficult budget year and that everyone has to work responsibly to do right by our city. These are targeted, thoughtful restorations that show that we have listened to the community and that we are prioritizing safety. And that's the crux of this budget. No gimmicks, no Hail Mary passes, just responsible decisions based upon what is best for San Diego's future. And one aspect that has been particularly important to me is protecting the investments that we have made in building back our workforce after years of attrition that left the city of San Diego severely understaffed and unable to perform the basic work that residents expect. And let's be very clear. Our operations and our ability to deliver services to our residents are completely dependent upon our city workforce. And this budget keeps our word to our employees by upholding their labor contracts that we negotiated 3 years ago. And we're working hard to ensure that no one is involuntarily separated from the city service by putting people whose positions are being eliminated into existing vacant positions. And unlike during past downturns, this administration, my administration, will not be slashing pay or gutting pensions of public employees. We will keep our commitments to our employees and find smarter ways to manage our fiscal challenges. Now, I realize that this budget has a lot of painful cuts in it. I'm not happy about it, and I don't expect anyone else to be happy about it. But the environment that we are in, one that features rising costs, falling revenues, and uncertainty and volatility on the horizon, means that this budget must hold the line when it comes to our most critical priorities. It's about maintaining the foundation of our city while we work to stabilize our finances and build a better future for all of us. As of today, this budget will now be in the hands of the City Council. And the Council will have the opportunity to make further adjustments. But under the law, the budget must be balanced. So any additions must be offset with corresponding cuts or new revenue. And that means that that's what it means to balance a budget. And so I'll be working closely with the City Council to ensure that we remain on solid financial footing. I'll close by emphasizing this. We are very close to structurally balancing the budget, something that San Diego has struggled to do for decades. This is going to be a tough budget year. I've told you that since last winter. But I believe that if we eat our vegetables this year, make the tough choices necessary, and fix the foundations of our city's fiscal house, we can be in a stronger position next year to grow and to reinvest in the things that San Diegans care the most about. This is about responsible governance, making the tough but necessary calls in order to fulfill our responsibility under our city's charter. This is also about continuing to make progress even during difficult times. And most of all, this is about continuing to serve the people of this great city with integrity, focus, and results. Those comments, I'm happy to take your questions.
Mayor, one change that I didn't see is the addition of funding for the Rosecrans shelter. I've been talking to residents and staff at the shelter. At least one person I talked to has already put in notice that they're going to be leaving their job because of the uncertainty. And the people in the shelter, even as I tell them the city's committing that they're going to make sure they're not going to end up on the street, they don't believe it. And they want to talk to you. They want you to come to the shelter and talk to them. Can you give me an update on what's happening with that, and also respond to those that are scared right now about what the future might hold for them?
Sure. For the benefit of those who don't follow this quite like Lisa does, this is the proposal to end funding for the city's Rosecrans homeless shelter. This is something that's been operating for a couple of years now under a joint partnership with the City of San Diego and the County of San Diego. A reminder that this arrangement has been one where the city invests $5 for every $1 that the county contributes. And as you know, Lisa, I believe that the county is moving forward with an elective demolition of the adjacent building that is 16 feet away from the shelter where these very vulnerable, mentally ill and substance use disorder residents are existing. They have no plan for the use of that site, no permits, no environmental review, to my knowledge, no funding. And this is not me saying this. This is what I've been told by county leaders themselves. What they're expecting to do is to demolish the building that is next to the shelter and thereby terminate the utilities that service that shelter, cutting off electricity, water, sewer service. It will leave this particular site that is already vulnerable to flooding to be subject to even more flooding because the building will be gone. This is all costs that they expect the city to bear, not the county to bear, despite it's their choice of doing this. Again, with no real plans, I think, in the short term to do anything about it. So we do not believe it's a reasonable investment in this facility that by their own admission and in the budget that was released by the Chief Administrative Officer last week only funds the shelter until March of next year.
They do have a board item that's going to be coming Tuesday to vote on an $800,000
Right.
allocation for the utilities. I also spoke with Lucky Duck Foundation. They said they might be willing to chip in so that you could do some analysis of the impact.
Correct. So a couple things that are wrong with what you just said, not wrong. They lack critical context, Lisa. $800,000, which, by the way, is my understanding, is from ARPA funds that were appropriated by the federal government in 2021. Reminder, it's 2025. Those were emergency funds about the pandemic. Why are they still have those dollars 5 years later? Might want to look into that. Secondly, $800,000 is not the cost of reestablishing utility services at that site. By the county's own admission, it's a minimum of $1 million. It could be as much as $2 million. Again, their expectation is for the city to bear that cost of a construction project that they are choosing to initiate on their own when, again, for no reason. I mean, I understand they want to tear down that building.
They want to put subacute beds there.
I've heard that from one person. When I've asked others, they don't have an answer for that. But more importantly, my understanding is there's no vote to do that. There has been no funding allocated. There's been no environmental analysis performed. This is not something that is happening anytime soon. The demolition is, but the construction and reuse of that property is not. And so if you and I both agree, and I know that we do, that homelessness is a crisis, do we really need to do this? I don't believe that they do. But by the county's own submission to the city of San Diego with an MOU to extend the operations there, they're only offering until March. That's it. They continue to have the imbalance of 5-1 into the benefit of them in terms of funding. And all the additional expenses are expected to be borne by the city when we're dealing with this particular situation. I've had to move shelters in the past. I know what it takes. We're doing that now because if we shut it down in July 1 or in March or at some time in the future, there will be costs associated with relocating these individuals. These are costs the county is not willing to bear. So given our limited financial situation, we will do what is responsible. Stop intakes at this facility, start redirecting individuals to our existing shelters. In the last month, this city, under this budget crisis, have established 3 new shelters, constituting more than 500 additional sheltering opportunities in the city of San Diego. That's what being serious about homelessness looks like, not what you're asking about.
So you know I've got more questions.
And I don't have more.
One, and
Yeah.
we'll talk after because I want everybody else to get. But do you want to respond to those residents and staff?
Yeah, well, Lisa, my record speaks for itself. In my time as mayor, we have more than doubled the number of shelters in the city. More than doubled. None of this has been easy. You all have covered those stories about how people are angry when we put shelters in their community, including you. Rarely is there the follow-up to explain how things get better once you create those shelters and get people off the sidewalk, get them into care, and get them off the streets. And I think we will soon have data that will show that what we are doing in the city of San Diego is working. But that is against the opposition of communities that are often fearful of these projects, against the lack of action by partners like the County of San Diego, Caltrans, and others. But we are persisting the way that we are against all odds and seemingly finding progress. Still a lot more progress to be done, no question. But I think my record speaks for itself with regard to prioritizing this issue and being willing to, in a difficult budget year, put more resources to this challenge to grow the number of beds available in our city. And my challenge remains the same. And Lisa, one day you will write this story of other jurisdictions in this county that refuse to do one thing for the homeless. How many cities in this county provide 0 shelter beds? The vast majority. And yet no one is asking those mayors what they're doing about homelessness. You simply ask me about the ones that I'm doing, the ones that are going away, but never about the ones that are being brought online. 3 shelters, 1 month, over 500 sheltering opportunities. That's what taking homelessness serious looks like. And we will make sure that the folks who are at that shelter are able to transition to another location. Reminder, though, a lot of the folks at that shelter have severe mental illness and addiction issues. That shelter operates as a behavioral health facility, and that is why the county should take on more of a responsibility for operating, because that is their jurisdiction and that is their charge. That is the population they should be caring for. Other folks? Yeah. I'll ping pong back and forth. Yeah, please.
Mayor, we've had many community members reach out to us about the cuts that you've proposed to the rec centers.
Yes.
And a lot of these members, of course, are senior citizens. We actually just came from the North Park Rec Center.
Mm-hmm.
There is a very cute group of women there playing pickleball. They said that they have written you. They've all kind of grouped together, and they're asking if there's one cut that you would reconsider not doing, it would be to the assistant center director position. I'm not sure if you know kind of more on like a granular level, but that position, the person who works those centers, are really the ones who help set up the nets, you know, for the elderly. They're the ones who opens gates. They kind of really do a lot of what they call as like the grunt work or the line share work. And I understand that you have like more senior supervisor positions that you need to keep and on both ends. But would that be something that you would reconsider? I know this is your final draft and this is in council members' hands now, but if if you could respond to them, is that something that's even possible, that could change before the budget is finalized?
It could change if the city council wished to do that. I would not recommend that. I think what is missed in what you just shared is the context with what we're trying to accomplish. I mentioned in my comments about how, despite having roughly 400 positions being eliminated through this budget, it's our intention, it's our commitment to make sure that no one involuntarily separates from the city. So many of the park and rec positions that are being eliminated in this budget, many of them are being reclassified in order to make sure that the people who are currently in those positions are able to lateral into a different position. A lot of it's about title changes and things of that nature, but the net result is that those people who are doing that day-to-day work will continue to do that day-to-day work at the city. The reduction that I think they're fearful of, and this is where I need your partnership on, is to understand that this budget does not close a single rec center in the city of San Diego. We are reducing hours, but we are not closing rec centers. Those people who are performing that work will continue to work for the city of San Diego, and we will get through this. Obviously, all of this is subject to action by the city council, so something could change. But those positions is not about eliminating line staff in favor of management staff. Quite differently, what we're trying to do is make sure that those people who provide for themselves and their families, are working to make ends meet in a city as expensive as ours, continue to have a job on July 1. And to do what you may be suggesting may result in them actually receiving a pink slip. And I'm doing my damnedest to make sure that does not happen. I'm mayor of this city that is fortunate to have 12,000 employees, and I feel as though that I'm responsible for 12,000 families. And that's why I'm repurposing those positions in order to make sure that those folks do not have to go to the unemployment line. We'll go over here and go to Joey and then over here. Yeah.
When making these revisions and figuring out what could get funded, what cuts you were able to roll back, why did you decide precinct Humane Society instead of saying, okay, we can open libraries in certain neighborhoods on Sundays?
A lot of it's math, Joey. In terms of the dollar amounts associated with the things that you said might be restored, those are larger dollar amounts than what we're restoring. This is a very small restoration. I want to say, in an ordinary year, right now I'd be standing here making numerous restorations. This is not an ordinary year. This is an unusual year, where we see plummeting revenues and rising expenses. So we had very little money to work with. Our chief financial officer, Matt Vespi, and others in his department worked very hard to try and find internal swaps, taking colors of money and trying to figure out what is doable, what's allowable under the rules. You all never, I think, do a good enough job of explaining how constricting the revenues that we have. Much of this dollars is not fluid. They're not, you can't take this dollar from library and put it over here in development services. Like it's curtailed. What we were able to do was have enough flexibility to restore things that I think are important. I took seriously the comments of our council president and the folks in our rank and file patrol staff and the police department to say that restoration in Northwestern is important. Also, the Humane Society was very outspoken in saying that they don't believe they can be successful. It's not a full restoration. Again, I don't have enough money, math. But I could do enough that I think this will be meaningful for them to continue to provide that service as well as the police department. Again, there are others little swaps here and there, but this is not an ordinary year where we can talk about dozens of restorations. This is really a handful of very modest switches. Again, representative of the fact that the city's financial situation has not improved over the last month. And a reminder of context, everybody, San Diego is not alone in this regard. Most big cities are facing this challenge. My colleagues in San Francisco and LA are facing this issue. Fresno, Austin, Houston, everyone's dealing with this. And so we're just having to grapple with it the same way that they are.
And speaking of revenue, how confident are you that you're going to get the revenue from the trash collection fee? What happens if you don't?
Well, it's not just the trash collection fee. This budget presumes the passage of Measure and implementation of Measure B, as well as the passage of the parking reform package that I've put forward, both of which will be considered by the City Council in the next month or so. If they do not pass, more cuts will be necessary. They will be substantial, and they will likely result in the layoff of city employees. The ability to prevent people from going to the unemployment line will probably be unavoidable at that point. I'm optimistic that it will pass because I recognize that how essential these two actions are going to be to balancing the budget and passing it. I think the council members understand that as well, and they would hopefully understand that their no vote would result in significant job losses as well as drastic reductions in neighborhood services.
My name is Trina. I have a bit of an unrelated question. You were a pretty vocal supporter of Prop 36, and obviously the police officers here, forcing it report to you, Lisa and I have been doing some analysis, and we found that although Black San Diegans make up 6% of the county, they account for 38% of Prop 36 related arrests, excluding repeat offenders. So do you have a response to that disparity?
No, I'm not. I'm familiar with your data. I'm happy to look at it further. Matt?
The critics of the budget, particularly with regard to the library, saying that these across the board cuts are actually inequitable
Yeah.
the way that they're being done. I mean, does this new budget respond to that? Is it more of an increase, or is it simply still across the board? And then how would you respond to those critics?
So this proposal, this update, what I'm introducing today, does not have substantial changes to rec centers, parks, or libraries. With regard to the allegation of across-the-board cuts, I would disagree, and I disagree strongly. One, because what we are doing, particularly in the case of park and recreation facilities, our Park and Rec Director, Andy Field, is trying to provide some latitude for council members to program their communities. So we're going from 60 or 65 hours a week of rec centers down to 40 hours. That's a significant reduction, there's no question. But what we're trying to do is provide 30 hours of base programming and then allow flexibility amongst the remaining 10 hours to more closely match the needs of a community. So think about a neighborhood that has more senior citizens. Let's open those additional 10 hours in the morning and have them operate. Maybe in a community with more young people, they can operate in later hours after school. So we're trying, again, to be flexible. That's literally the opposite of an across-the-board situation. Here's the last thing I'll say. Well, maybe two more quick things. I think there's always an assumption that people live their lives in one neighborhood, and that simply isn't the case. You may live in North Park, work in downtown, have your Little League in Mission Valley. And the assumption that people just stay static in one location is not accurate. And so we do have to consider services across the city to make sure that no matter where you live, you can have some level of access to those services and offerings from the city. The last thing is that the question of equity is an important one. And it's a complex one. It's one for which the city is still learning its cadence and fluency. Right? Under my administration, we brought forward an equity agenda, and this budget, every decision in it has been filtered through a lens of equity to understand how it would impact historically overlooked and underinvested communities. And so when you do these stories, and if you want to bring up the issue of equity, bring it all up. Bring up the fact that our 850 some odd million worth of capital investment in this budget, every one of those projects is filtered through equity to understand that we're going to put more investment in communities that have not seen it historically. If you talk about equity, make sure that you bring up the fact that programs like our eviction prevention program, that our housing instability prevention fund, that Employ and Empower, that No Shots Fired, these are absolutely equity programs. All of them are funded at or higher levels than last year. So sometimes people like to pick and choose. Sometimes people want to oversimplify. Sometimes people want to overlook other things that are going on or advance an agenda or a priority they may have. But bottom line is this budget was built with equity at the center of it, and I'm very proud of what is in here, and I believe that's one of the reasons why the City Council will adopt this budget. Yeah, Maya.
To expand upon Joe's question, the public safety, the police department specifically, is one of the only departments that had an annual budget increase of $29 million, and then people are seeing that they're going to also be getting money restored. So I'm hoping you can help us understand this and understand, kind of like Joy was asking, why is this more important or a priority over libraries per se, where those cuts are totaling like $1 million.
No,
like,
that's not true.
Is crime worsening? Is there a reason why this is the priority?
So there's a lot in there. Let me try and unpack. First off, the stat you provided is incorrect. The reductions to libraries, sadly, are larger than that. I think to the order of $4 to $5 million. Not proud of that, but just, again, facts. It's Trump's America, so I recognize facts are a little bit fast and loose, but not with this mayor, okay? Secondly, you asked about crime. No, crime is down. Crime is down, and that's a good thing, and we must keep it so. When you ask why this, well, number one, under our city's charter, our city's constitution, public safety is our top priority. It's prescribed in our city's constitution, and this budget reflects that prioritization in our city's charter. I think, additionally, if the city of San Diego's police department and fire department are not responding to 911 calls, I don't know who will. And so if we do not resource them correctly, that will be problematic. We will be in violation of our charter, and we will be leaving people in very vulnerable and dangerous situations without the support of the professionals that we invest in to provide the services that they need. Lastly, I understand sometimes the point of view. I get this from a lot of constituents. I've never been a subscriber in the notion of defund the police, and I think a vast majority of San Diegans agree with me on that. But importantly, no one thinks a lot about that need until they need it. And so I recognize that maybe even some council members may want to reduce public safety spending. But the second that they need someone to come to their door in a moment of emergency, they're call 911 and they're going to expect someone to show up. And I would expect that they would vote accordingly, given that they would do that for themselves and for their own families.
I don't think we're talking necessarily about a decrease, you know, there was a $30 million annual increase. Can you help people understand that?
Well, yeah, let me align things, right? So we're talking about the reductions to policing that was over here, then you're talking about the increase in funding. The answer to that question is inflation, right? So even with a nearly $30 million increase to our police department budget and a nearly over $20 million increase to our fire department budget, we're not keeping up with costs. Gas is expensive, right? You and I may not like what we pay for gas. These guys have hundreds or thousands of vehicles that they have to put gas into, right? Same is true for electricity. You have an SDG&E bill, so do we. Staffing, right? We've concluded labor agreements with all of our employee groups that include modest raises. Those are in there. So the increasing costs of providing the services in 2026 is more than it was in 2025, and even with the additional budget capacity that we're proposing, it's still not enough to keep up with what's going on. And so as a consequence, there are reductions to both departments, despite the fact that there is more money going to both departments. Anyone else?
Mayor, another question on equity. So last week, council members were saying that they would like to see some library funding for wealthier communities. The cuts be deeper in those communities versus the ones south of the 8.
Yeah.
Was that explored when you were putting together your May revised budget?
Well, I think we have tried to consider, both from a council and a public perspective, as well as from staff, operational staff, the pros that are behind me that run these operations every single day. How do you accommodate this stuff? There are some significant, I think, operational challenges to doing that. I think there's also some real question, as I was mentioning before, about how does that play out. So I'll give you an example. I'm a native San Diego, right? I grew up in Claremont. It is not a community that is considered one that is in great need. I will tell you, the way I was raised, we had a lot of need. I know what it is to stand in the church parking lot asking for food subsidies. But you wouldn't necessarily know that from the community I grew up in. My point is this: when making these budgetary allocations, I try and understand what I believe is necessary to have the most positive impact in the broadest possible areas in our city. And again, it goes back to the notion that people don't live solitary lives in just one neighborhood. They get around the city. And it may be that you're getting off work and you want a library near your job that's actually going to be open. And that may not be in a community of concern, but you may be a resident of a community of concern, and that's how you're going to access city services. So we're trying to provide an array of offerings to make sure that we can serve as many people as possible in an incredibly difficult budget year. $258 million budget deficit, roughly 12% of our general fund. There is no way to do this without making very difficult cuts. But to the question of equity, again, I will say that there are real operational challenges for trying to implement maybe one of those suggestions. We certainly considered it, but the balance of how we should do this, I think the tilt and the final decision was one where we are maintaining library services in every neighborhood, where we are maintaining recreation center services in every neighborhood, just often with fewer hours.
Last question.
Yeah, Tony, is that? Amen. How are you?
Mayor, I just wanted to ask you, what would you like to say to San Diegans out there who are a little bit worried about the quality of life, losing that, what makes San Diego's so great, fire pit, access to Miramar Lake, whatever you basically want, things like that. It sounds like you and your staff have done everything possible to tighten up the belt. What would you like to say to folks out there about the reality of what's happening?
I really appreciate that. That's a great way to end because, as mayor of this city, I have an opportunity to talk to a lot of San Diegans every single day. And what I would say is that what you're experiencing in your own family's budget is exactly what the city of San Diego is dealing with. Higher gas prices, higher energy prices, higher housing costs. These are all being experienced by us, just on a grander scale. There's a lot more zeros and a few more commas when we're dealing with it, but it's exactly the same. And the way that you are trying to navigate that with your spouse and your kids and whomever else is in your household, we're trying to do this very same thing. So you've seen me do things like cancel private sector leases and move employees inside of city-owned facilities in order to save millions of dollars. By the way, that's millions of dollars that don't come out of library or rec center budgets, right? We've made the choices where we can, but even then, we still have to make what are regrettable choices, stuff that I'm not happy about. But under the law, I'm required to balance the budget. That's also for your reporting tonight. We are not the federal government. We cannot run a deficit. We must be balanced. Funny, when I share that with people, they start to get it because they think that we're the feds and we're not. This budget is intended to make sure that we keep our city safe, that we continue to drive down the number of people living on our streets, that we can continue our progress for building more housing that everyday San Diegans can afford, and that we continue to make progress on rebuilding our infrastructure, specifically our streets and our storm drains, because that's what's necessary. I believe, as I said before, that we can get through this year. This is going to be a tough year. We knew it. We knew that months ago. We've been taking deliberate steps over the last number of months to mitigate and to reduce the impacts to neighborhoods, to residential quality of life. And I think because this budget is not $258 million worth of cuts, it's actually somewhere closer to about $112 million in cuts. Still a lot, but not as bad as it could be, shows that I am concerned about that, and I'm doing everything I possibly can as the leader of the city to make sure that we protect it. My bottom line is this. We will get through this. We have lived through tough budget times in the past. And my commitment to you and the residents of this city is that we will address the structural budget deficit, hope for better financial days, more sanity at the federal level, and that we have the ability over the next number of years to regrow this organization responsibly. And that would be restoring hours that have been reduced for critical neighborhood services, reinvesting in the things that we must do, like roads and infrastructure. But more than anything, I want to leave people I want the council to hear me very clearly that they should be very cautious when making any kind of additional alterations. This has to be balanced, and any additional cost needs to be offset by reductions. And so that would be my comment to the council. My comment to the general public is we will get through this. We will come out of this stronger. I intend to be here for 3.5 more years, and I will use every bit of experience and knowledge I've learned over years of working here to make sure that we get through this time and that we rebuild responsibly and as quickly as possible. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for being here today. Thank you, guys.